Hello, welcome to Enterprise Tech Spotlight, where we help business executives and business leaders get educated on technology topics so that they can make better business decisions for their IT. My name is Keith Ells with Info Systems, and joining me today is Andrew Littleton from IBM. And Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so when we were talking about this, doing this podcast, we decided we should name it Not Your Father's IBM, or maybe IBM for everybody else. So tell us why you think that's a good title for today's podcast.
Well, first of all, you've probably never seen an IBMer not in a blue suit and with messy hair. But
what are you saying about me?
Well, you're handsome. You're super handsome.
Thank you.
I'm just not your typical, prototypical legacy IBMer.
So I do think it would be helpful to give just a 1 minute background on kind of your history in the business and why you chose to come to IBM.
Well, so I've been in technology sales now since 2003. Funny story, I moved to Nashville out of college, 2001, to be a rock star. You can't feed children being a rock star, turns out. So I started having kids and needed to make some real money. So started working at Dell at 2003. I was there for 14 years. Went out in the field for Dell for a couple of years, was doing, I was the endpoint specialist. So laptops, desktops, rugged devices, high-end workstations, kind of the evangelist for the state. Did that for a few years and then got stolen away by Western Digital. And I was the Western Digital storage team. So they entered into the on-prem storage array market. I did that for a couple of years. And then earlier this year, IBM started approaching us. Western Digital actually sold off the division that we were part of. So it created some uncertainty. And IBM was actually looking to expand and get into this geography-based sales organization again and get back in the markets face-to-face with customers where they'd kind of gotten away from over the years. And to do that needed a little bit different perspective. IBM hasn't ever really, over the last decade, run a geography in a regional way like we were doing candidly at Western Digital or a lot of the OEMs, where you have someone who sits in region and goes out and evangelizes the platform. So IBM had historically been more divided by vertical and legacy customer base. So they needed some people who knew the market, knew the partners, knew the customers, the ecosystem players, which is why they were coming after folks like myself. So they hired me and Jake, my engineer. We were a team. We came over as a package, and here we are.
Well, that's great. And so IBM is now hiring former rock stars, is what I'm hearing you
That's
say.
exactly what it is, right? So
that's good. Yeah, so let's talk about that geo coverage, because I do want to get to the technology, but I think the geo coverage matters for folks who maybe aren't in the industry, aren't technical, don't know how this works. Most technology companies have employees who work in the market, even if they're selling through partners, who work in the market to build relationships with customers, with business partners, with just a variety of folks in the community, whatever the case may be. And IBM just had a different model before that was really focused on the enterprise, transparently, that Fortune 1000 type company. But now my understanding, and you know, this has been evidenced by you coming on board, is that IBM's really saying, hey, you know what, we've got great technology for the smaller companies. And so we want to go after it. But in order to go after it, they had to change their sales model a little bit. And so I'm excited. We actually worked a little bit together in a previous stop that you had, but I'm excited to have you on board with IBM.
Yeah. Well, you make a great point. So one of the conversations I had when I was being courted by IBM was around exactly what you said. Everybody knows who IBM is. But I think that there's probably a little bit of a misnomer that I'm not big enough for IBM, or IBM's too expensive for me, or IBM's too technical and complicated for me, which is 100% not true. But I know that that's the perception because that was my perception. So I had a conversation in the interview process with my vice president. And it was kind of a funny conversation. I was telling him reasons why I didn't really want to come to IBM. And he said, let me ask you a couple questions, because I had questions about the technology. I had questions about the market position. He said, those are fair questions. Your perception's wrong. So our technology is actually very, very good. And if you look at Gartner, look at IDC, look at third-party reviews, it's corroborated there. The story is a great story. The problem is nobody knows it. And he asked me pointedly, he said, you've been selling storage for years now. When's the last time you sold against IBM? And I said, never. He said, yeah, that's a challenge. So IBM is currently the number 2 in the world from a storage market share perspective. The Fortune 1000 knows who IBM is, and we have a huge footprint there. But if you look at the rest of the world, there's not a lot of IBM outside of those larger established companies. Healthcare, banking, the Fortune 500 know and trust and love IBM. But your general commercial business across the rest of the enterprise, it has candidly gone to EMC or Pure or NetApp or Nimble or whoever the latest all-flash or craze that came through. Mm-hmm. So what we are doing now is we're making a concerted effort to go out there and say, hey, you didn't know that IBM played in this market. You didn't realize that we're more affordable than anybody else. You didn't know that we have better technology than everybody else because we've done a poor job of letting folks know that candidly. And that's what my job is. I'm a geographically based storage seller, but I'm an IBM evangelist for Tennessee and Kentucky. So my job is to make sure our partners understand where we fit, to end users, to the customers, let them know our technology is actually far better than what most of the other offerings are out there. And candidly, we have a cost per terabyte that nobody can compete with.
Yeah, so you made a couple of points I want to come back to, which is kind of why you're here today. So let's talk about IBM's fit and even the smaller businesses. We're actually running some promotions right now. The website should be up very soon. We're going to publish our kind of end of the day price, out the door price to the customer for these storage environments. And we've talked about storage on previous podcasts, so certainly you're welcome to go back and listen to those. But for that data storage for your computing environment, whenever I look at those price points from an IBM full priced out the door, full feature, we're talking less than $20,000, right? We're not talking $200,000 or even $120,000 in some cases. It's kind of under that mark. And this isn't third line used cheap stuff that came out of somebody's trunk. This is fresh from the manufacturer with all the features turned on. And I think that's a story that, candidly, when I first saw that price point, even I was a little surprised, and I've been in this industry for a little bit, as I know you have as well. So let's talk about IBM's. Are they? It seems like they've gotten serious about the price point of their technology. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. I think there's probably a piece of it where when you've candidly given away your market share over the course of the last decade or so, you have to buy that back. Mm. You're not going to get that back by being more expensive, even if you have better technology. So you need to have a head-turning, compelling reason for a customer to be willing to look at your technology. And especially, we're in an environment right now where it's hard for customers to justify vetting out a new technology. It's hard to get on site with customers. You don't have the time and the luxury to bring in 4 and 5 vendors and try out different things. Business challenges and needs right now are completely different than they were 5 months ago. So we need to give customers a reason to give us an opportunity to position what we're doing. And let's just be honest, price matters. Yeah. If you're not getting a good ROI or a good TCO right now off of what you are purchasing and investing in, CFOs are going to tell you to take a hike. Yeah. So that's kind of where we have started.
No, I agree. So that ROI, that return that folks are getting on their investment, the total cost of ownership, that TCO. But part of that TCO and part of that ROI is also the feature set. So IBM has some of the best storage technology in the world, especially if you're in that Fortune 1000 space. Mm-hmm. But what I find impressive, and this change was over a year ago, where they started bundling a lot of their management tools into the core packaging, so a customer's not having to, well, the entry price is low, but then if I really want all the features, we've seen this over and over again in different products, I'm really end up paying the same price or more than I pay with other guys.
Right.
But that's not really true with the way that IBM's packaged their licensing.
Right. Well, you're right. It's a different business model. And part of this happened 5-6 years ago with the new storage, not evolution, not a revolution maybe, with all the new startups that came out of Silicon Valley. So you had the old historical OEMs that owned the U.S. market share for technology. Then you had all these startups that pop up, the Nimbles of the world, the Pures of the world, the Tagiles of the world. And in order for them to be competitive with the legacy vendors, they had to do things a little bit differently. All-inclusive type licensing models, introducing new technologies in a fresh way. And it took a little while for everybody to catch up to that. But gone are the days where you can nickel and dime somebody with a licensing package because you'll quickly be exposed. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we have adopted that type of strategy. All-inclusive licensing just makes a whole lot of sense. If you sell somebody the benefits of an all-flash array, put it on-prem, and then the customer says, I needed deduplication, I needed compression, I needed encryption, I needed to be able to replicate this to an offsite location. Oh, you didn't tell us that. So that puts the customer in a really, really bad position if they weren't educated with what doesn't come with it. Mm-hmm. So it's a protection for the customer or for the end user to not be surprised after they've made a big investment that, oh, shoot, I didn't ask about this particular feature. And I've had that conversation. I had a customer panic and say, hey, I totally forgot. You probably went over this, but we've purchased this now. And I hope it does dedupe and compression, but we didn't talk about this, about whether that was an additional cost or not. And we know we talked about the technology, but I just blanked. Did we get the license? Like, man, no concerns. 100%. You got all the feature functionality that comes with the array when you bought it.
Yeah. And that's the kind of story and kind of that assurance that people want. So let's talk about the experience now. I want to go back to this Geo location because you're in Nashville.
Right.
You cover, I think, 2 states. But IBM's made the investment and hired over 100 employees or so, somewhere in that range,
right,
to have that kind of coverage nationally. So this is not
Correct.
Just a pilot program in Nashville. We'll see how it works out. I mean, I know people that have been hired in for Georgia, for Alabama. I know folks have been hired all over the country. I saw the chart earlier this morning with all these different additions. And so that idea that you can buy from the guy that, their kids go to school with your kids, or they're on the same soccer team, or maybe they go to church together, whatever the case may be. You guys are part of the community. You're not on airplanes all the time anymore.
Exactly. The goal, if you're in a major metro in your state, odds are there's an IBM geographic-based salesperson within a couple hours from you. So within a short drive. We have, yes, I'm Tennessee, Kentucky, but I can be in Memphis, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Louisville, Lexington within 2.5 hours. So the same thing in Alabama. There's somebody that can be in Birmingham. We have a guy that lives in Huntsville. The engineer lives in Huntsville. The account executive lives in Mobile. So there's somebody that can be at any point in that state within a matter of hours. We got a couple teams in Georgia, a couple teams in Florida. We have a team for the Carolinas. So it's important. I think we're in the sales. If you're in technology sales, face-to-face sales is more important than it ever has been. Well, while right now it's a bit of a challenge to get face-to-face with folks.
Right.
COVID's a jerk. It'll be gone eventually, and you don't sell remotely anymore. So folks want to make a connection with their sales rep. They want to. I joke with people and say my job is making friends, because all things being equal, this is someone who you're going to be investing a lot of time and resources and learning about technology, learning about resources. Hopefully you have a relationship where where me as the OEM and the end user, if they have a challenge, if they have a need, if they have a question, they know to reach out to me. And if they don't like me, why would they want to buy my stuff? Mm-hmm. So it's more important than ever to build relationships and be where the customers are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those relationships, matter. I mean, my first job, the owners of that company said, all things being equal, people buy from people they like. Mm-hmm. And if they like that person enough, all things don't even have to be equal, right? So building relationships really does matter. And so I guess what I want to do now is just kind of wrap things up and talk about one final point, which is what is kind of that next evolution of IBM? Where do you see us and where do you see IBM going, if through the rest of 2020 into 2021? I mean, how do you see that progression?
Yeah, we are continuing to evolve and grow this hybrid multi-cloud type strategy. And it's really the story is, I'll take a step back. There's a lot of different directions that we're being pulled. If you pull up CIO magazine, last year it was all about cloud. You pull it up today and it's all about this hybrid multi-cloud approach, which is because we tend to go guardrail to guardrail in technology. We want everything on-prem. And then the next year, no, we want to take everything off-prem. And then you realize, when you do that, there's real challenges when you don't have a diversified strategy. It's not cheaper to be in the cloud. Mm-hmm. It's not cheaper to be on-prem. There's costs that are associated with whatever strategy you take. And what's probably the most important thing to do is to put your company in a position where you can be flexible. Especially in an environment we're in today, flexibility and agility are more important than ever. So not putting all of your storage eggs, proverbially, in one basket. So we're adopting that strategy of having a piece on-prem, having a piece in the cloud, having a piece in a colo somewhere else, but being able to manage that and look at that holistically, being able to push and pull workloads to where that makes the most sense. Whether it's in AWS or whether it's in the IBM cloud or whether it's in an InfoSystems cloud that's hosted and managed, or whether it's in an on-prem bucket, we'll call it a cloud, that sits on site at the customer. What's important is the customer getting the information they need? Is it protected? Can they access it? Can they effectively move it to a type of storage that makes the most economic sense for the performance? And still be able to accomplish your business goals.
Yeah, and having those business understandings of what's needed for your storage is critical. And that flexibility that IBM brings, being able to connect to, different clouds, different hyperscalers like the AWSs, the Azures that are out there, is really going to bring kind of that total experience and kind of all the options to the end user. So I think that's the good path. I think that's the right path for IBM to be on. So we're excited to see where that goes. So Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
This has been really, really good and good to connect with you again.
We'll do it again sometime.
We should, absolutely. So thank you for joining us for Enterprise Tech Spotlight with InfoSystems. And actually, we're going to be doing another recording here in a few minutes to talk about how we can better leverage some of that technology that IBM has and some of that multi-cloud experience to help drive down the total cost of ownership. So that should be a good conversation as well. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.